Today, I'm very happy to welcome my special guest, Rich Curtis. Rich received a Master's of Fine Arts degree from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago and is currently an associate professor of art at Thomas University in Thomasville, Georgia. He has also been a hospice volunteer for the past 5 years and completed training for end of life doula certification in 2023. We're going to be talking about how Rich utilizes art in his end of life work, and I'm really looking forward to that. So, Rich, thank you for joining me today.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah, I was really interested when you reached out to me because I don't meet very many people who are artists, art teachers, and and professors who are also end of life doulas. So I was really fascinated to hear that story, and I was hoping you'd kind of tell us um, what led you to become a hospice volunteer and then to go on to get doula certification.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. And again, thanks for having me. I've been a big fan of the show, and and it's kind of part of the journey of going from volunteer at a hospice to doula. But just to kind of back up, uh, I did start teaching art and art history at Thomas University about 2011. And when we first moved here, it's a small private college in South Georgia. Um, the hospital has a hospice wing, and they had a camp for children who had lost somebody. So it's called Camp Heal. And I don't know if I'm allowed to plug the name of the hospital, but it's Archbold Hospital.
Mhm.
And Archbold Hospice is the where I volunteer now. But Archbold Hospice was the sponsor of this Camp Heal. And since I was the new art professor in town, they asked if I would do the art activity with the kids, and that really started. It's one of several organizations that I've really been involved with, doing art and service and working with my students, sometimes doing service projects with art. Um, in this case, I was just asked to do some activities with the kids, and that went for a couple of years, and then they got a new bereavement coordinator, and my name was, I think, dropped from the list or whatever. So it was several years. It wasn't until um, I started volunteering again that I went back to doing the Camp Heal, which is an annual thing. So um, it wasn't until about 2016 that uh, started a I really began a secular mindfulness practice, and was very much into that for a couple of years until I was really looking for a kind of a spiritual home. Up until that point, uh, I had not had any sort of spiritual practice growing up, uh, and so after a couple of years really wanting to find a a spiritual home, uh, I was led to the Soto Zen Buddhist practice,
Mhm.
and part of that uh, in my uh, in my sort of research and trying different religious traditions, and just kind of uh, trying to find that sort of ethical and moral um, foundation for the mindfulness practice that I had. It was through that I started listening to different podcasts. And one of the podcasts that I listened to was interviewing Frank Ostaseski, who was the founding director of Zen Hospice Project.
Mhm.
And so, as I was interested in Zen Buddhism, I also became really interested in hospice work as a kind of extension of that, and and so that and I also met as in priest through some other kind of connections, really during COVID, when everything was sort of virtual. that that sort of world opened up, and so I started reading and thinking more about it, and found that some friends of mine were practitioners as well, and so I kind of uh, have been meeting with them virtually for about 5 years, and simultaneously really was inspired. I was walking by the hospital and saw the hospice office, and was really inspired to just walk in and walk to the volunteers desk and volunteer coordinator's desk and ask, what can I do? Um, oh, it was interesting. I've been reading your the 7 Lessons book, and
Mhm.
that kind of moment of just inspiration and needing to do something and calling up the hospice office and asking, that really resonated with me, um, as a kind of a similar experience of just needing to do something, and I feel a kind of calling to do it. So
And finding out it was the right thing at just the right time when you
yeah,
just
exactly. Yeah. And so so that has developed, and like I said, 5 years of volunteering, and then a couple of years ago, uh, through your podcast, actually, I started hearing about end of life doula, um, and your interviews with a couple of end of life doulas uh, made me want to research that, and I think it's interesting because I've been reflecting on why uh, why I needed or felt the need to get a further certification. Um, I'm not particularly entrepreneurial, so I don't feel like I'm going to be using my doula certification for like a private business. But it really was, I guess, a deepening or an extension of the training that I got as a volunteer. Um, in fact, the volunteer training was so much a foundation of what I uh, do as a doula. So it really is kind of just practicing, um, I guess, a little more intentional in that respect, but the same work that I've been doing. Um, I also guess, uh, in reflecting on it, feeling like I wanted to integrate this art side and with spiritual practice and the hospice work. So that was another sort of reason for trying to find that. So
it's interesting to me. Well, for one thing, the Eastern religions, I think they do lead us toward studying death and
mm,
contemplating death, which I wish we here in the West, our Western traditions and Western culture included more death, because it feels like we have to go outside kind of the traditions we were raised with in order
right,
to find a place where we can just be mindful and contemplate death and reflect on it and be comfortable with the fact that we're mortal.
absolutely, and just well, and from things like the 5 reflections, and some of these practices that are central to um, that that religion. It is so central, and it's not in a sort of morbid or depressing way. It's life affirming, uh, and in a way um, enriching to appreciating life and practice and all of that. So
Yeah, it seems to me too that it alleviates fear to a great extent, and that really opens you once you're not like recoiling and rejecting
mm,
the idea of death out of fear, and you can just relax around it and embrace the reality of it. It seems like it just opens you up to a lot more depth, and but also the possibility of even more joy and deeper meaning in
sure,
life in general. And I appreciate that you felt called to want to be of service to people who are dying, because to me seems like a really important calling also, that maybe, I mean, I wish all of us felt that to a certain extent because we could be of greater service to our neighbors and family members if everyone had some inspiration to get some doula training so they could show up for the people in their lives.
But right, even if it's for the just for uh, taking care of your loved ones at home or whatever, it's it's been a wonderful journey, definitely.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious because we talked before this interview about how you have brought your art into into your work as a
Hmm.
doula and hospice volunteer. But one question I hadn't thought to ask before is, have you brought death into your teachings as an art teacher? Do you ever do projects with your art students or talk about that at all?
That's really interesting. I I've only I've talked about the projects that I'm doing, but I haven't. Don't think I've assigned any projects for them to explicitly uh, think about um, the subject themselves. So that's interesting, and that actually um, that just sort of sparked an idea for me for an assignment for them. So that's beautiful. Um, I I think in the classroom I have such a specific idea of the curriculum and trying to um, uh, I've gotten them to do service projects for different organizations, but to think about um, and they've done some things for hospice patients too. So, but like cards and so forth. But to actually make it a subject for them to personally reflect on, I don't think I have. So I think but I think I will now.
Well, yeah, well, it's an interesting time in life, but if you think
Mm,
about it, if we could help every college age person, every college student
absolutely,
wake up to this reality of being mortal, like how that could change things from the future for the future at their
absolutely.
age. Anyway, I was curious about that, but I
No,
have no doubts that you'll you'll be weaving that into your class in
I'm
some way.
absolutely. Yeah, that's wonderful.
So I don't tell us about the project that you've been working on. I don't want to say what it is because I just want you to describe what it is to the listeners.
Sure. Well, I'm doing so the I'm doing kind of two different projects uh, based in kind of two uh, different media that I work in. One is sort of drawing and painting, and the other is in performance art. And so the first one is that I've been doing with my hospice patients is uh, called Hands of Wisdom, and that started just as an informal uh, way of connecting with my patients. I asked them, "Do you mind if I draw your hands?" Um, and that that first of all, it's because there's a confidentiality uh, issues. I don't want to like draw their faces,
Mhm.
and also there's other complications too. But and I'm not a portrait artist, so I'm not. It was more of uh, a way of connecting with them and not really having the pressure of trying to draw their likeness in a way. And so the the images started as just oh, can I draw your hands, and then I give them the drawing, and then I have taken a picture of most of them, and some of the ones that are have the most character, I've redone them as ink wash drawings, and so um, I have about 60 now that I've cataloged, and they're just they range from a person's hands that they're non-responsive and the family's in the room, and I will do the drawing for them and leave them for the family, Uh, some of the patients are uh, very coherent and talk, give me their life story as I'm drawing their hands.
Mm.
Uh, one of the one of the things that I've really been um, touched by, I've had the um, really the privilege. There have been a couple of people who didn't have any family; they were in a nursing home, and I've been drawing their hands, and one of them passed away like within minutes after finishing the drawing, and I uh, put it with his stuff so that the family, when they came back, but um, the family had left. They weren't going to see him again, and so I really wanted to spend that time with him and be with them because I could tell he was transitioning. And in both cases, there were some issues. So there's just a range of experiences, and they are all incredible and beautiful. And that document of the hands is just really um, just a small gift to the patient and their families. So,
For me, that it's just so touching because one of my earliest memories are of my grandmother's hands. I remember
mm,
sitting on her lap as a child with her hands folded in front of me, or she was holding my hand. And I just remember looking down at her hands and I could still see them. I could still see that image
yeah,
of her hands so uniquely her. And so the idea of having a sketch of her hands to keep, that just really touches my heart. And I think that's a really wonderful gift that that you give to the family members to do that. But I can imagine too that you look back on those drawings and each picture has its own story to tell.
yes, and one of the things that I'm doing is trying to compile these drawings and then write some kind of um, poetic or creative response to either the story of the person or my interaction with them, or um, just their sometimes it's their living conditions or whatever they that is striking to me, and so I'm in the works of trying to create a book for this body of images, um, and it's just a way of not only it's I guess further honoring the interactions that I've had and the patients. I don't know.
Well, for people watching the video, I don't know if you want to share your screen and show
Yeah.
some of the images that you've drawn. I think they're a little bit
Yes.
small on the
I
screen.
can
And
I can click on each one,
oh, okay.
and so this is one of the first ones. This gentleman, his wife was with me. I came in, and this was one of the first ones I did, and we were talking about how he was obviously right-handed, and he had worked as in construction all of his life. So you can see how his right hand is kind of a little more withdrawn than the other one, and or maybe arthritis or something. But anyway,
Yeah.
he was. I didn't realize it, but he actually passed away like that afternoon. But when I gave the drawing to his wife, she actually started stroking the drawing itself to and said, "Oh, those are his hands,"
Mm.
and that was so touching to me in that moment.
And it really shows how unique hands are and how much of even of our history that gets revealed in our hands.
Definitely, um, this is a pin an ink wash drawing of the original. So the original was a drawing. This is the very first one I did, and kind of what gave me the inspiration to kind of collect images of them. Uh, this woman obviously had some issues with arthritis, and her fingers were um, twisted quite severely. She used to be an artist, and so she was telling me about being an artist, and she had a few paintings still in her room, and and they were these beautiful sculptural um, hands. And I said, "Do you mind if I draw your hands?" And then I gave her the drawing, and she really appreciated that. And I just loved how it was that they were kind of turning into art pieces themselves, um, and that I could, kind of capture that for her. Uh, but she really was one of the first, the the reason for doing this project. So
Mm. Oh, she must have loved the fact that you're an artist and being able to watch you at work and to tell you about her work and what
yes,
she's done.
it was a great way to connect with her, and just one or two more. This is of a gentleman that I went to. I would go out into the county to his trailer for he was actually on our service for almost a year and a half, but he was so we say ornery around here. He was so ornery and kind of a curmudgeon, and was really offended the female nurses with how sort of bawdy he could be. So they asked me to go out and visit with him to see if I could connect with him. And he the first time because we typically on our first visit we take a thing of flowers. That's usually a weekly thing where we visit our patients and often bring flowers to them if they want. So I was bringing flowers, and he turned me like, "Ah, get out of here!" Yeah. And so he and so I was turned away that time, and then a couple of weeks later, I went back without flowers, and uh, finally sat down with him, and he's kind of softened to me, and he grew to be one of my closest um, patients, and a real dear friend, and his caregiver too. And uh, and so when I see this picture of his hands, I just remember him. He was he had such a tough exterior, but he was just a teddy bear, and so it was just a sweet time. And I still am in touch with the family.
What a good illustration of the fact that sometimes that tough exterior is just a defense to cover
Yes.
up the sensitivity underneath, but and yet we get turned away sometimes by the outside and can't find a way through it to get to that softer
Right.
side. And that's really sweet. I love that you drew his plaid shirt in this picture and his hands folded, one on top of the other. It's just really lovely.
Thank you. Yeah, he that was pretty much his uniform that I always knew him. He would always have that a plaid shirt of some kind, and his jeans ready to go. So he was um eh, I don't know if there's, let's see. Yeah, one or two others are I mean, they're I will send you the link so that they could go in the show notes to this. uh, as you can see, some of them have a bit of text underneath, and that just came from my conversation with them, or some text inspired by the interaction. So I was already kind of thinking about how to combine the image and text in the in this kind of book idea. So
Were there some where you drew the loved ones' hands as well? 'Cause it looked like,
yes, down here,
yeah.
well, right. So this one, and I will say that most of the ones that I have done are in person. This happened to be from a photograph, but this is three generations. Um, so the mother and or the so the grandmother, mother, and daughter, the
Oh,
three generations uh, were depicted here,
no, that's
and
beautiful.
so that was really sweet. And I've done that a couple of times by request, but for the most part, I want it to be a face-to-face interaction, and I try to do, depending on the comfort of the patient, I try to do the drawing in person as well, rather than from a photograph, because I want to capture that energy. But that was certainly a beautiful exception. Um,
Mm. It's just so lovely. I'm still amazed at how much is conveyed through these just simple pictures of the hands, but how much you can really feel the presence of the person, even though we're only seeing their hands.
Thank you. Yes, it is a. I have too been just amazed at the expressiveness of once you get into the just the kind of character or the extension of their character that is conveyed through their hands and their gestures. Really beautiful. Um,
Yes.
yeah.
Well, I'm really looking forward to the day when you have this compiled into a book.
Well,
Uh, that'll be wonderful to look through.
well, I will definitely let you know, and I want to send you a copy, so I'll I'll make sure to do that.
It impresses me. I guess what I want to say is that for each one of us to remember to bring our talents into the room with us when we go to visit patients, whatever they are. And you're a wonderful artist and brought that into the room, and look what you ended up creating, the impact that it has and how touching it is. And I think everyone needs to think creatively in that way. What's unique about me that I can bring to each bedside?
Definitely, and one of the things I was thinking about, I think in our earlier conversation, you were asking about things that I might like tips for people who are interested in hospice volunteering and so forth, and that is one of them is like uh, finding something. Well, first of all, you don't have to. There are lots of ways to volunteer, so you don't have to visit. You can give your talents in other ways by donating your time and so forth. But also, if you do visit, that there are uh, any number of ways to really interact and uh, with with the patients and share a part of yourself. So uh, that was certainly something I wanted to convey. So
Yeah, and my hope too was to encourage people, because I've had some listeners reach out and say, I've thought about volunteering in hospice, but
hmm
I'm a little reluctant or I'm not sure. And I think there's a certain amount of fear for people to overcome because they don't know what it will be like when they walk into a patient's home. And I'm not sure what that was like for you when the first day you volunteered, or if there were things you had to overcome in order to, to be a volunteer.
uh, well, I think that certainly the volunteer training was uh, was ample. I guess one of the things that I wasn't prepared for was the level of training and the kind of red tape that it takes to become a volunteer, as there should be, because you are entering these people's homes. There's confidentiality and also respect that you need to give to these very vulnerable people and their families, and uh, just learning how to um, be present without um, uh, pushing pushing or overstepping
Mm-hmm.
can often occur. And so I was so there that was one thing that was very useful. And yeah, I think another uh, people may be a little reluctant to volunteer because they think they themselves are too old to volunteer. But most of my fellow volunteers are retired and actually have a lot more time to go and do visits than I do. Because I teach, I am pretty much Fridays are my off day, so I get to do my rounds on Friday. Uh, and I really like to. There's a hospice unit in the hospital, and go there and spend time. So that's what I focus on. Um, but and then of course we can talk about like helping yourself to manage and not burn out is another thing
Hmm.
that I would certainly um, that I wasn't really aware of when I got started, and I kind of went into it and realized, oh, I definitely need, even with uh, my spiritual practice, the meditation and everything, that there's um, yeah, needing a support group and a therapist and just friends. I've even started doing a death cafes, uh, just getting into just having those conversations to open that up, not as a support group, but just as a kind of special interest group. And so
Hmm.
just making that part of my practice. And the more that I normalize the subject, and the more I normalize those or that we all normalize that subject, it makes it easier to talk about and not so scary. So
Yeah. And it seems like we're at a place in our society right now where there's more openings around death and dying. It's not as taboo a subject as it used to be,
hmm
but still, for each one of us, each one of us out there doing some sort of service in this area, we may not have people in our day-to-day lives who want to hear about what we're doing, who are open to talking about it. So you might have to seek out a community of like-minded people, like a death cafe, where people are comfortable and you can talk about your stories, you could talk about the
yeah,
process that you're experiencing.
definitely. Yeah, my they are they are happy I found something I like, but they don't want to hear too much about
Yes.
it. So, that's, and I respect that. That's fine. But it's funny. Um,
I
uh,
appreciate that you talked about the importance of the training as a hospice volunteer and then training again for the end of life doula. And
yes.
that maybe if someone's on the fence and wondering if they would like to be a volunteer, they should just go get the training first, because even the training, I mean, you can get the training and then decide visiting patients isn't for me, but I could do something
Oh yeah,
different in hospice.
absolutely. I mean, there's so much office work and that sort of thing. There are a couple of volunteers that just do that, at, and we have a fairly small volunteer pool, but there are two or three ladies that just that's what they want to focus on, and they're great, and keep it running smoothly. So um, it's not all going out.
And thanks for mentioning the need for self-care, just because we overlook that a lot in hospice work and end of life work, because a lot of us who get drawn to it are kind of natural carers. It comes naturally to care about other people, but we may not be as good at taking care of ourselves. And I think there is a lot of burnout and compassion fatigue, because we do need to talk more about, wait, what are you doing for yourself? How are you protecting your own energy and taking care of yourself?
Definitely. Um, and I think that's one of the reasons some of the like the volunteer pool definitely shrank after COVID, but I think it has been hard to get people back because well, there's burnout from just being alive, much less wanting um, to put yourself in this. But but the rewards are so incredible. So I guess I would urge people, if they have any interest at all, to explore it, because it's definitely worth it.
Yeah. One thing I witnessed for a lot of our volunteers in hospice is how often they found something in common with patients, because you go in as you're just a lay person. You're not there for
hmm
any, you're not there to get their medical history or talk about any of that. You're just going there to chat and get acquainted. And how often volunteers would say, oh, it turns out we attended the same class or workshop, or they find things in common. And that is so beneficial to the hospice patients, making
hmm
those connections. And so that's one of the ways that volunteers really serve, that the hospice staff doesn't have time to have more in-depth conversations about your life and what you've done and what you've seen, but the volunteer does, and that's where you find those commonalities.
Right. Going back to kind of my impressions initially as I just got started, I felt very, even with the training, like I don't have any medical background. I don't, what do I have to offer? But it is those interactions and how helpful and just how vital it is to the patients for their well-being. That, I mean, both being a volunteer and a doula, it's non-medical guidance that you're giving them, or in the case of a volunteer, just being there to fix them a sandwich or just sit and talk or to sit in silence. And it's that that I had to learn that I don't have to go there with. In fact, it's imperative not to go in thinking that I have to do something, and just to sit and be present. And if there is something that is needed, to be able to do that, but not to go in thinking there's something I need to accomplish.
Do you
Uh,
find sometimes that it's actually the family members who kind of need your support as much as the patient, that they're often
sure,
want the ones wanting to talk as well, and they are looking forward to your presence there also?
definitely, especially um, towards the end of the time, and when the patient is non-responsive, it is often longer conversations with the family members um, that that are really meaningful, and getting them to open up about the the loved one who is the patient. Um, I think that's a really healing opportunity for them as well.
Yes, definitely. And then when you add in the drawings that you leave behind for them to have as just a memory, I think that's really phenomenal. And so touched by that. But while we have time, maybe you should
Yeah.
go into your performance art project. It's Breath Poems. Is that what it's called?
Yes.
Yeah.
So breath poems. Just to back up very briefly, in graduate school, I studied performance art and specifically studied sound poetry. So sound poetry is making it's kind of a relatively obscure performance art, but it's basically taking phonetic or sound bits and putting them in kind of patterns or improvising into a kind of poetic music. So somewhere between music and poetry and vocal utterances, and that can take the form of um, bits of language or mimicking sounds from nature or whatever. And so I've done different projects with that. Uh, but the what really started um, inspiring me, well, first of all, were the breathing patterns of my patients, um, whether they were on oxygen or if they were in the last stages, the end stage breathing, the Cheney Stokes and agonal breathing, and the rattle that you hear about, these kinds of breathing patterns that can be a little jarring for the loved ones who are
Hmm.
hearing them, but they are. So I guess I'm interested in taking these breathing patterns, and I've done a little bit of just recording of just the sounds of the patients when they were breathing, um, just as a kind of uh, source material. And the idea, well, is I'm creating a score of sorts, or a poem of with several movements of these different kinds of breathing patterns, or inspired by the breathing patterns. Um, and there may be some spoken word text over that, but for the most part, it will be a kind of meditation on these different breathing patterns and the holding the breath and the just the way the sound of the throat and the
Hmm.
and the sound of the nasal passages and all of that. Just to um, so it's really a meant to take something that can be quite, I guess, disconcerting when you are a loved one with somebody who's in end stage breathing and turn it into something beautiful, um, or something inspiring and not so um, uh, not so negative, I guess is the yeah.
And it's also it's a it's an unknown sound, I think, to
Mm,
most of us who, if we haven't been with someone who's dying, we haven't heard it before, which is what makes it seem frightening to us also. And so there's something kind of normalizing these sounds, like this is what it sounds like. This is normal, this normal
right.
breathing at the end of life.
And then and then taking those sounds and maybe uh, using them as a starting point, but then trying to uh, modify them or push them so that they transform into something else. So the sound starts with what you might hear, but then transforms into some other kind of sound. And so that's what I'm really working on now is taking that source material and stretching it and kind of seeing how the sounds can change and evoke different uh, moods and that sort of thing. So
Mm. Well, and do you have any idea what you'll do with that when with that project or?
I am hoping that there's a small press publisher who wants to do the Book of Hands, and I'm hoping to have the recording done so that it can be on uh, a service where if you buy the book, you can get access to the recordings for
Mm.
free, or you can download the recordings for a certain fee or whatever, or maybe I'll just make them free. I don't know.
Wow.
I'm so I'm still working those details out, but I would love for both projects to kind of come out simultaneously, and I'm shooting for uh, late spring, early summer to hopefully have the both projects done so that they can uh, have a full body of work to show.
Wow. So it's just so beautiful and so unique. I mean, I never would have thought of recording those breath sounds, but it's really brilliant. And I think what a way of reducing fear
Mm-hmm.
around changes that happen at the end of life and helping people get used to the sounds and to hear
Sure.
them before they end up hearing them with a loved one at the end of life. That's what is such a novel idea, and I can't wait to see all of this come to completion soon.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited, and it has been, like I said, this this kind of this work has really inspired my artwork, which is really and spiritual work is all sort of they really are feeding each other at this moment, and so it's been a really interesting journey. So I'm
I really think that's how it should be in a way for all of us. You know,
ideally,
like ideally, like our exploration and getting comfortable with the idea of death feeds us spiritually and helps us
mm,
grow. And then that also feeds all the rest of our lives and the work we're doing in our relationships. And I'm a huge believer, as you know by now, probably from
hmm,
listening to the podcast and
yes,
reading my books, that if we can just help everyone come to some sort of comfort and embrace of death, it would make life better
hmm,
for nearly everyone, if not everyone, I think.
at least a start. Definitely, it would be a yeah, um, and I think and I have been trying to spread the word about podcasts like this and other forms of media that make the subject accessible, and just as starting the conversation
Hmm.
in whatever way is possible. So that
Yeah.
if the sounds of the hands is a way as an entry point, that's great too. So
Yeah. Well, I'm impressed with your creativity and that you've brought it so naturally into the work that you're doing. And so I'm looking forward to staying in touch and hearing more about these projects as they come to fruition.
well, thank you so much, Karen. Yes, I appreciate the opportunity to share them, and look forward to. I will definitely let you know when it's out, um, and
And
all of that.
and then you'll send me a link to the blog I can share on the show notes with listeners who want to learn more. But are there other ways they can connect with you? You were saying maybe through Facebook.
Right. I'm a, a social media. I'm kind of a luddite, so I I have a Facebook page, and that's kind of an extension of my day-to-day portfolio and whatever. It's not. It's more of my art than my personal stuff, but so that is a my platform for kind of sharing things, and then the blog uh, will eventually have, probably more about the projects, and then I may have a website for it as well. Um, but I will certainly let
Is
you know
the
about that.
is your Facebook page just under your name,
Yes, it's under Rich Curtis,
Rich Curtis?
um, not the director
Not
or
the
writer
movie.
director,
Yeah.
the British writer director.
Yeah, we had that discussion like, oh,
Yeah,
you're not that Rich Curtis. Okay.
not that Rich Curtis,
He must
but
be very busy and not have time to be a hospice volunteer, but
it's it's research for his next screenplay. Anyway,
yes.
um, no, it's but yes, so that is where I am on social media, and uh,
So I encourage listeners to get in touch with you then through Facebook, and then I'll have a link to the blog in the show notes if anyone wants to go there, and we can all keep following your work, Rich, and I'll be happy to spread the word whenever you're ready for it to be out in the world.
oh, wonderful. Well, I'm honored, and I will certainly let you know. And thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. It's been a pleasure to talk with you today.
Absolutely.